and I appreciate very much the opportunity. I don't get to preach very much, and several years ago, one of my friends was pastor of the Church of God, and he wanted me to come and preach for him. I said, okay. Well, they had what I called a picking and a praying. And they had about 15 people playing guitars and mandolins and violin. And then they had a time of anointing. And when they told me I could come up and preach, it was 5 minutes to 12. And I said, how much time do I have? And the pastor said, brother, we don't wear watches in this church. Okay. Somebody told me to, use the acronym KISS. K-I-S-S. Keep it short, stupid. So I'm going to give that a try. If you have your bulletins with you or your outlines, you can follow with me or in the Bible. My message is coming from Romans chapter 8, verses 14 to 19. And Paul is writing to the church at Rome when he says, as far as, got to remember, the Christians in Rome are having a hard time. Of course, in Paul's day, everybody was giving the Christians a hard time. It's no different than it is today. But let's see what Paul had to say to the Romans. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the Spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself heareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God. As you know, we're living in a time of crisis. The greatest crisis that has hit this generation is the pandemic. It has completely disoriented our lives. Completely. I know last year, Penny and I would get in the car and just drive around Frankfurt and go to Arby's or Hardee's and get some sandwiches and go home and eat it. And those four walls of that house began to move in on us, And just to get out, you couldn't do it. And because of the chances. And we were seeing what was happening to people that did not take any precaution and the sorrow. I've had 2 funerals where people have died, young men who died of COVID. It's something that you need to be aware of. Not only has it disrupted our lives, but it's disrupted the life of everyone in this world. It has touched every country and every home. And right now, there doesn't seem to be an end. They say, oh, it's getting less, but then it picks up again, and then it gets less. And they have all these variants. It's scary. I don't know about you, but I'm scared. Because I don't know what's going to happen. And so Paul's words to the Romans are not unlike today. He said we're not to be slaves to fear. He also said that our suffering is like what Jesus suffered. And what we suffer now will never compare to the glory that's awaiting us in heaven. Today compares to the crises of the past. I would say most of you did not live through the 1930s. If you did, you were just a baby. I was born in 1938, so I was on the tail end. But my parents told me about the experiences they had. If you want to get a glimpse of what it's like on MeTV, I don't know if y'all get it or not on your cable, but in the mornings you have the series called The Waltons. And you saw what they had to go through. And from what my parents told me, very similar to where we lived. And then there's the limitations of World War II. Remember World War II? I don't know about what it was like in the country, but I lived in Louisville. And we had what you call ration stamps. And you couldn't buy anything unless you had those rations. And they sent so many to each home. And my dad had an A on our car, which meant he was only allowed so many gallons of gasoline. And we couldn't go anywhere. And I remember, in order to buy a tube of toothpaste, you had to have the ration stamps and the old tube to get another tube of toothpaste. I remember that. I was a kid. I remember it. And I remember my job was to take a hammer and beat the tin cans up, put them in a box, and put them out on the end of on the street there, and a truck would come by and pick it up. And every night we had these heavy curtains you had to put over you because you couldn't have any lights on. And the limitations that we were placed on. And you got these people who don't want to get shot. Maybe I don't know. I hope I'm preaching to the choir here. But I remember as a kid, in 1948, 49, 50, you couldn't go to a picture show. You couldn't play baseball. You couldn't go to a playground. You couldn't go swimming. You couldn't do anything. And the Courier Journal would publish pictures of children in iron lungs to make them aware of what polio was. And then Dr. Salk made the discovery. And everybody lined up to get that shot. And then there were people who said, "Oh, I'm afraid I don't want to get the shot." Well, another doctor, Dr. Sabin, came up with, put the vaccine on a sugar cube. And you eat the sugar cube. You get 3 of them. You had Sabin Oral Sunday, SOS. Everybody got a sugar cube. And people lined up for that because they saw what was happening. Practically every home had someone with polio. And we don't remember these things. The fear of 9/11. I really, there's nothing I can say about the people in Pennsylvania. They took over the plane, it crashed, and they all were killed. But that plane was heading for the White House. And all these things going on. And what are we going to do about it? Sometimes we feel helpless. But Paul gives us the marks of the Christians in times of crisis. First of all, he said, look for those who have hope. Hope. He says in verse 15, for you have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption whereby we cry, Abba, Father. Because of our relationship with Jesus Christ, God is our Father. And a good father, takes care of his children. And that's what God is doing. As the Allied troops moved across Germany in 1945, people began to hope again. And then when the Marines were taking island after island in Japan, and finally in September of 1945, we were going to have peace. There was peace. But then we had the Cold War. I remember as a kid in school, they had practices of air raids. And we would have, I grew up in Louisville, so that's why I guess. But we had to go and get under our desk. And we had that practice to make us aware that very easily we could be involved in another nuclear war. Someone has said that World War III will be the most technical and most complicated war that ever been fought. And World War IV will be with sticks and stones. We live among people who are hopeless. I see it all the time. They just give up. And the attitude is, what's the use? We're all going to die. And that's prevalent today. See, if I can't live like I want to live, then I don't want it. I don't care. I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going to take the shots because I don't care. I've had 2 funerals, 2 young men who died of COVID. it's easy to give up. Just give up. I've dealt with people who have just given up. There's a man that several years ago as a chaplain, he kept slashing his wrists. But the EMTs would get there in time to patch him up. And one of the EMTs asked me one night, he said, "Chaplain, could you do something about this guy?" He said, "He's constantly cutting." Well, the guy's lonely. His family has no use for him. He's a good man. He's just been mistreated. I had a brother just like him. He is mentally deficient, but he's still a good man. He's lonely. And so I told him, I gave him my telephone number, and I said, "Now, Billy, when you get where you want to cut your wrist, you call me before you do it." Okay. Well, I've been about 6-7 years now. He calls me when he's going to do it. He called me night before last, and he says, "I've had it. I'm going to cut my throat." I said, "No, you don't want to do that." "Yeah, I do." I said, "You're just lonely." I said, "Why don't you just walk outside?" And he's got a couple of cats. I said, "Go out there and see what your cats are doing." So what I have done is I've been sick. I've had bypass surgeries and stents, and I'm a cancer survivor and all that. For some reason, the Lord's keeping me alive. And I told him about my problems. Now he calls me, see how I'm doing. But you see, because now, I told him the other day, he said he was going to cut his throat. I said, "Don't do that." I said, "That would make me unhappy." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I care about you, Bill. You care about people." One of the things they taught me is that dealing with people who want to take their own life, they think nobody cares and they're alone. And that's the job we are to do. We are to give people hope. That's what Paul said, faith, hope, and love in 1 Corinthians 13. The greatest is love. Well, let me tell you something. Hope comes in a close second. Because people without hope die. You just give up. And I had my uncle, my dad's younger brother, was diagnosed with cancer. And the doctor told him what it was, and he went out, and his son and his daughter stood there, and he said, "Now, Dad, there's hope here. They're going to give you some chemotherapy, and we're going to go through it. We're going to be right with you." He just turned his head over to the wall. He died the next day. He gave up. See, it's easy to do that. Because giving up is a form of dying. And it's also contagious like the measles. You get around a person that's discouraged and everything, and have no hope, it puts a damper on everything. You've got to be positive. There's so much negative in this world because people are giving up. And see, that's what Satan wants us to do. Listen, let me tell you something. Satan is alive and well. Now, Satan is not in the places of sin and degradation. No, he's not. He's here because he wants to keep you quiet. He doesn't, if you believe in Christ, Satan doesn't have any control. But what Satan can do, he can make you quit. And that's what we have to be aware of. You got people that don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. They just lay around and let the government take care of them. But you see, laziness brings about hopelessness. We no longer care when you no longer have hope. Many people see life as a grave. You know what a grave is? It's a rut that's cut and boxed in at both ends. Get out of the rut. Kind of like that old van you all have got. It keeps on keeping on, doesn't it? Okay, that's what we got to do. But see, that's what keeps us going, hope. You know what the symbol of hope is? An anchor. We've got some songs that use the word anchor. We've got a pontoon. Haven't been in on it 2 years because it either rains or we got a doctor appointment. Or it's cold, can't find time to do it. But we've got these anchors. And my wife and I like to sit out in the lake and fish. I'm not like the bass fishermen. I've seen bass fishermen run up and down the lake. They spend more time running up and down the lake than they do fishing. And they make waves, And so what we do, we put these anchors down, and that keeps the boats from going against the shoreline and everything. Well, that's what Jesus is. Jesus gives us an anchor to hold on to. And that's what it's all about. And people who give up lose their anchor. And we need Christians who believe. That ministry that you're all doing, that's a great ministry. You may not think it do any good, but what it does, it plants the seeds of hope. Somebody cares. And that's what it's all about, is caring. But not only should we look for people, the marks of Christians, look for people who have hope, but we look for people who understand. In verses 16 and 17, he said, the Spirit himself heareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. Heareth. God gave us one mouth and two ears. We're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk. And when you're talking, you're not learning anything. You've got to listen. You got to listen with understanding. We live in a world of communication, don't we? I mean, I don't have it with me. I don't carry it in the church, but everybody's got a phone. It gets to the point where you have a meeting or a funeral. The funeral director says, okay, we're going to start the service. Everybody turn their phones off. Everybody, we carry a phone around. I carry a phone around because if everybody something, call me. There's a lot of I call. I do not, and I've never had an extended warranty on my car. And they call me all the time. Extended warranty. And they use local numbers. I think of somebody in Frankfurt's calling me. And it gets to the point where I do not answer the phone unless you leave a message. Then I'll pick up. Because I remember a couple years ago, I got a call, and it was Julian Carroll. Julian Carroll is a former governor and senator, and I've known Julian Carroll and his family for years. And my daughter at that time worked for the Attorney General. So I called and told her what it was this extended warranty dump thing. And what it was, they had taken that phone number that belonged to Julian Carroll's wife, who was deceased, and was using that to get into people's homes. But with all this communication we've got, my grandson, he works for Facebook, and he gave me this thing, a little TV set called a portal. And we can talk to our granddaughter who's on the USS Ronald Reagan in the Persian Gulf. And we can see her. You talk about communication. Our son was stationed in Japan. Same thing. Instead of talking to him on the phone, we talk to him on a portal. It's a lot different. You can see, and that especially made Penny feel good because David was showing her around the apartment and everything where he lived in Japan. He's now back home. He retired. 50 years old and he's retired. Oh. But we need people to understand. See, science cannot produce a listening heart. Only Jesus can do that. A listening heart. We need to be listeners. I've been a chaplain for the Frankfurt Police Department for over 18 years. But I have spent most of my time listening. I've been trying to get some other ministers to come on as chaplain. They don't pay you anything, but you get a lot of free stuff. And I tell you what, if you've ever ridden in a police car, first time I ever rode in a police car, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were going down Home Street, and they got a call at what they call 1046. It's an injury accident on Wilkesville Boulevard. We go down Home Street, 70 miles an hour with the lights and sirens, and I'm hanging on for dear life. I've gotten used to it. But what I'm saying is that I spend most of my time listening. I listen to what the men have to say. Policemen are a different breed. They have built a wall. They call it the blue wall. And they're very careful. Their relationships are mostly with family. They have very few relationships with other people other than other police officers. And I asked one of them, I said, why don't you have any relationships with other people other than just other police officers and family? He said, if I pull somebody over and it's a friend, I got to give them a citation. And they look at you and say, well, I thought we were friends. And he says, I don't want to be put in that position. That's not good. I mean, you break the law, you should pay for it. I don't know about you all, but in Frankfurt, you pull somebody over. You know the first thing they say, do you know who I am? Yeah, well, I'm finding out on your... Well, I want to call the governor. Well, you can do that from the jail. I mean, they've gotten so they don't do it. But it took me several years to get over that blue wall because a lot of people are afraid of preachers, aren't they? I've actually seen people say, well, this is Reverend Hartung. Oh. Don't want to get struck by lightning, Lord. Yeah. But they back off from you. And I can see why. In working with the police, I have found there is a level of life in every community that's just above the animal level. And how they live, and they need the Lord. And I was in a meeting with a bunch of ministers of all different denominations, Franklin County Ministerial Association. And I was telling them what I saw and the need. I said, we need to reach out into these housing projects with Jesus. It doesn't matter whether you're a Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, or Church of God or whatever, but we need to reach them for Christ. No, we're not interested. Because, one, they don't have any money. Two, they don't have any talent. And three, they'd be a drain on our resources. I quit going to those kind of meetings. And I can see why people are that way. And the greatest compliment I have ever gotten was from several police officers. And they said, Chaplain, if I got a problem, a spiritual problem, I'm going to come to you. I'm not going to go to my pastor because he doesn't understand what I do. Police officers across the nation got a bad rap. Listen, I know quite a few preachers, you do too, that aren't worth their salt. I know lawyers that'll be sent to prison. I know politicians the same way. I know doctors that I don't have any use for. And every profession, every group, there are people who want to break the law, think that they're above the law. And these need to be done. In 18 years, we've had 4 officers fired because of the misconduct. They won't put up with it. But because you wear a badge, you're somebody. They want to defund the police. If you defund the police, who are you going to call when somebody breaks in your home? What are you going to do? You'd be afraid to go out. It'd be like out in the Old West. Everybody have to carry a gun. It'd be the law. It'd be the law of the jungle. But we don't need new means of communication. We need the ones we got. We need Christians that have open minds and open hearts, who care, who listen. Listen to what's being said. The cry of need is great. And I think this program this ministry that you're doing, is an answer to that cry of need. People are hurting. We need Christians with open minds and open hearts. Did you know they have found in the 2020 census that the Christians no longer outnumber everybody else? And churches are closing. The church that I pastored for 26 years closed its doors. Another church came in and took over the building. And another church, Bethel Baptist, second oldest church in Franklin Association, is down to 5 members and no pastor, because we're not listening. We're trying to make churches into spiritual country clubs. You've got to get yourself right before you can come to church. That's not what we do. Most people want to talk. They want to listen. And so therefore, we need understanding hearts that do not make judgments. I listen to what police are. I don't talk about religion unless they bring it up. I talk about family, and I talk about their job and how they like it and everything. Because most of them are young. They're not big kids. And they're taking on responsibilities beyond what you would know. See, an understanding heart doesn't make judgments. When I went to, in 2008, I was asked to come and pastor a church called Calvary Baptist Church, Talbot Forks of Elkhorn. And I only preached, first Sunday I preached to 11. And I said, we need to reach people for Christ if you want to save your church. And when I retired the third time in 2017, we were averaging 70. Of course, now they're down low because of the pandemic, because everybody else knows. But they would come. I let them come. Listen, I had couples coming that were living together. I had couples that were gay. I had people who were coming. They came in T-shirts and shorts and flip-flops. I didn't care what they did. They came. They had to heard the gospel. You know, when I stand before the judgment seat of God, I don't have to give an account of what my children did, what my wife did, or what my church members did. I'm not responsible. You're responsible for your life. Only person I have to give an account of is to Bill Hartung, to God. And that's, you know, I've heard preachers say, oh, I'm responsible. We don't want those people in here. Well, you know, Jesus had time for people. Remember Zacchaeus? The man who was up in the tree? And Jesus said, come down, I'm going to eat your house. Boy, that set a ripple across First Baptist. Jesus going with a tax collector? One of his disciples was a tax collector, Matthew. What about the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman? She was the woman of the street. And she went back and she told everybody, this man knows about me, but he cares. The one I like, the experience was with the woman that was caught in adultery. Remember that? They brought the woman. Where was the guy? You know, in order to have adultery, you got to have two people. And Jesus said, he is without sin, cast the first stone. And it said, the crowd began to disperse. The oldest left first, and then down to the youngest. It's a matter of communication and caring and listening. Then the third mark is the one that we have, because the problem is the psalmist said it best in Psalm 142:4. He said, I looked on my right hand and beheld, but there was no man that would know me. Refuge failed me. I was depressed, and no man cared for my soul. Nobody cares. Jesus said, I care. We've got to care. In order to care, you've got to love. He said in verses 18 to 19, for I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. We put up with a lot of things in this world because we know something's greater is going to happen. It's not my message, but I want to tell you. I don't know, may have told you this before. Did you hear the one about the man that prayed to God? He wanted to take his gold with him. And God said, okay. So when he died, he had his bag of gold. And he got to the pearly gates, and St. Peter says, what's in the bag? He said, gold. He said, what do we need pavement for? I mean, what we think is valuable on earth is nothing in heaven. But the one thing that a Christian can take comfort in is the fact that all these troubles we're having will vanish. You know, I like it now. We don't call funeral services funerals anymore for Christians, called celebration of life, which is more appropriate. It's more positive. Celebrate a person's life. And you know what the hardest funerals? I've had my mother's funeral. I've had my dad's funeral. I've buried 14 members of my family, a sister and a brother, and five members of Penny's family. But you know, the hardest funeral is not that, because I know where they are. I know where they'll be. I'll see them one day. But it's the person that I get a call from every once in a while from the funeral home. We got a funeral. We need a preacher. Can you do it? They don't have a preacher. They don't go to church. Now that's the hard one. That's hard. I don't know if you ever watched The Jeffersons on television. He was going to have to preach this guy. This guy was nothing. He didn't know what he was going to do. And he said, got up and he said, well, old Joe did not beat dogs. I hope they say more than that about my life. He didn't beat dogs. Jesus called on his followers to love. In the 5th chapter, verse 43 to 46, he said, you have heard that it has been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love them which love you, what reward have ye? Not even the publicans the same? It's easy to love people that love you back, but it's loving the people that hate you. You know, Paul said you show love to people that hate you, be pouring coals of fire on their head. Love is not what, we use the word, I love steak. I love to go on vacation. That's not love. The Bible has 2 of the 3 Greek words for love. Eros is physical love. It's not in the Bible. The word eros does not appear in the Greek New Testament. But the word agape is mentioned 253 times in the New Testament. Phileo, where you get like Philadelphia, adelphos is the word for man. So loving man. That's what Philadelphia. But from what my daughter tells me about Philadelphia, it's far from loving. Our cities, people are being shot down. Children are being massacred for no reason. But we've got the answer. So don't hold it to yourself. Share it. Share your love. See, we're supposed to love without qualifications. It's easy to love those that love you, but care about people who don't. I had a police officer that said, no way are you going to ride with me. I don't have anything to do with preachers. I said, okay, no problem. I never rode with him for a long time. And then one day, we were talking with a bunch of others eating lunch together. And I made a comment that Penny's comes from Wolf County, a little town called Campton. That's where her mother was, and that's where her family grew up. He said, really? Well, I'm from Powell County. I said, oh, really? Do you know so-and-so? Yeah, they own a motel. Yeah, that's Penny's cousins. Really? You know why he didn't want me to ride with him? He said he'd lose half his vocabulary. But I rode with him after that. Find something that you can deal with. Find out why they don't like you. Maybe they got a legitimate reason. But love is more than just putting your arms around people. Love is care what they're doing. But, you know, we live in times of crises. And God sends us leaders. Now, there are some leaders that are not sent by God, but you got to pick them out. You got a good leader right here. He leads you in the way you're supposed to do. You know that. He's got his limitations just like everybody else. But he cares. And that's what we need. You know, this is a little spiritual lighthouse on a hill, and there's a sea of lostness. And it's up to us. What you could do, I was going to suggest what you do is when you go home today, on the back of this outline, write names of 3 people that nobody likes, and start praying for them, and ask God to give you an opportunity to show them love, understanding, and give them hope. Do that. And God will bless you for it. But it's up to you. Each one of us has to make that decision.